Hello, I'm John Clark with the TOEFL program. Welcome to the world's premier podcast for international students, or at least in the top 1,000. I'm joined today by Mike Henniger of Illume Student Advisory Services. Mike, so grateful to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this today.
Yes, now the topic at hand today is the wild world of Canada, which has been the most interesting place in international education over the last 18 months. You could argue the last 4 or 5 years. But before we get to that topic, Mike, just briefly share a little bit about your work at Illume.
So yeah, I'm a lifelong international educator. I've never done anything else in my career but work in international education and specifically recruitment. Illume Student Advisory Services is based in Vancouver, Canada. We have 100 staff, around 100 staff worldwide with offices in Africa, China, Latin America, Southeast Asia and beyond. And basically what we do is we help universities and colleges connect with international students, and we help international students get the information that they need to make the right decision on the institution that they plan to study at. I think as we go into the conversation today, John, we're going to see that it is more and more complex than ever to make the choice of where to study. And there's a lot of questions in students and families' minds, and Illume's just kind of positioned to help them get the assurance that they are making the right decision and then they have the information that they need.
That's great. Well, I'm not even looking to study abroad, and I need assurances. So the first question I had for you, Canada, over the last year, we've had pretty significant study caps. We've had the elimination of the student direct stream. There have been wholesale changes to postgraduate work permits. For students that are still interested in studying in Canada, and by the way, there will still be hundreds of thousands of new students who enroll at Canadian institutions this year, can you explain what's going on?
I think the most important thing for a student or a family to understand if they're in South Asia or if they're in Africa or anywhere in the world and they're looking to come to Canada is that these changes that have been made by the Canadian government are in the best interest of the international students that want to come here. What's happening, and I said in my introduction that I have never done anything else in my career besides international student recruitment, the majority of it coming to Canada. And there's very few people that could argue that over the past 5 years, international education in Canada grew into something that it shouldn't have. Canada has built its brand over the last 2 decades on the quality of the education that we have. We have some of the best education in the world here in Canada. So a student coming here who's studying at a Canadian university or studying at a Canadian college could be assured that they were getting the highest level of instruction, the highest level of education. But that eroded. We started to lose that just because of the sheer volume. And we had students that weren't serious students coming to institutions that weren't serious institutions. And the government has really looked to reduce that. And I think everyone agrees that that's a good thing. Now, as always with governments, when they roll out things and, when non-specialists in areas, people who don't know anything about international education, start to make policy changes in international education, it can seem to be very blunt, and it can seem to be very unsophisticated. And that's what happened with all of the changes that come out, the study caps, the reduction of the SPP, all of those type of things. But at the end of the day, what Canada is looking for is we're looking for smart, motivated people who want to come to our country and want to pursue an education and want to better their lives. If a student fits into that category, Canada still remains the best place in the world, in my opinion, for them to study. I noticed with my team around the world and just attending recruitment events over the past decade, you meet students, they say, I want to come study in Canada. And you say, oh, what do you want to study? They're like, oh, what's a good program to study? Come on. We want people that have a plan. We want people that have a focus. We want people that are looking to excel. And so I think, especially if you're parents of a young person looking to come to Canada, and you look at your son and your daughter and you see a motivated young individual who really wants to excel and really wants to go and achieve their study dreams and then the career of their dreams after that, Canada remains a fantastic place to study. So I go back to summarize that to say that these changes, while confusing and, for us in the sector, traumatic, I would say, at the end of the day, when we look back in 2 or 3 years, these are serving the international students that are coming to Canada, and that's what it's all about. So Canada remains a very, very good place for you to come if you are a serious student that wants to study in a serious program in a serious institution and get a career and really look to drive your life forward, Canada's still, in my opinion, the best place in the world to do that.
I love it. So the headline I see is, despite the changes, Canada remains open for business. That's a fair summary.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have, just hundreds of excellent institutions across Canada that still really want to attract the best and the brightest. And I think if you're doing your research and the school and we have students showing up at schools in Canada over the past 5 years, and they didn't even know what city they were going to. And this is not, I'm not joking. Like, they're like, oh, they're 300 kilometers outside of Vancouver. And they said, oh, I thought I was in Vancouver. I'm like, you don't have Google in your country? And I think what we want to do is we want to really focus back on the quality of education that we have here. And that's the type of students that should be looking to come to Canada. And we are definitely open for business.
I love it. This makes me think, I live in Ohio, where just a stone's throw away from Miami University of Ohio, which is sometimes confused by international students for Miami University in Florida, which vastly different climates. Although, a quick pitch, I do love the Red Hawks of Miami of Ohio. Both schools are good.
January, the weather must look a little different though, no, right?
Yes. A difference of 50 degrees. Of course, that's Fahrenheit, so that's meaningless to most of the world. But Mike, I want to double click on one thing you mentioned. You mentioned in the past few years, you've talked to a lot of students who are eyeing a Canadian institution with very little thought as to what program they're pursuing. And I know with the recent changes to eligibility for a post-graduation work permit, the government has identified a bucket of jobs or study programs for which students will be available for postgraduate work. Without going too deep into the nitty-gritty of the legislation itself, do you see certain industries for 2025 and beyond where international students will have a good shot at obtaining a job after graduation?
Wow, this is a topic that we could do a 2-hour podcast on just this topic alone, John. It's such a wide topic. If I go back to when I was studying in university, and if I heard things like, YouTuber, blockchain engineer when I was in university, those things didn't exist. None of those jobs even existed. And I think so many of the jobs that are going to be 2030, 2035 don't exist now. I read about jobs called human machine team manager. I heard about AI ethicist. Like, these things, I don't even know what they are, but they're coming. So one, that's a very hard question. But in general, there are things that stand out. One, anything that has to do with helping people, healthcare, medicine, I think is going to continue to be elderly care, child care. Those things are going to continue to be very strong. Anything to do with technology. I look at wonderful university here in Canada, University of Windsor, and their focus, they have an excellent Masters of Engineering program. And I see the graduates coming out of that program and getting excellent jobs coming out, and it still qualifies for the postgrad work permit. So anything to do with STEM, I really feel is going to be strong. But I want to switch gears here a little bit on this question. And I really feel that, when I look, before we started recording, me and John were talking about, we both have children very much the same age. My daughter's just turning 5. John has kids around the same age. And we were talking about teaching them. And I really feel that if you're looking to pursue a career, go back to something, and this might sound cheesy, do what you love. And I think people are too much like, what's next in 1 year? What's next in 2 years? I was an English literature major. I studied romantic poetry in university. I've never taken one business course in my life. I've never taken an MBA. Now I'm CEO of a business with 100 people. I've always done what I've loved. And so, yes, there's these categories, like I said, healthcare, science, technology, all of those things are going to be key. But this is my chance to speak to young people. It's do what you love. Look towards doing something that's going to make you get up in the morning and smile and think, this is what I wanted to do my whole life. And if you do those things, I think the dots will connect together for you more than any way of trying to follow a formula of what's going to get me immigration, what's going to get me a job, what's going to get me those type of things. Stick to what you want to do and think about large buckets. Is it communication? Do you love communicating with people? Follow a pathway in that. Do you like helping people? As I said, well, then there's a whole category of jobs. Do you love technology? Do you love mathematics? Do you love those type of things? And then, hey, maybe you love reading books and maybe you'll be an English literature major just like me. I don't know, but don't get out of your wheelhouse of what you love. Stick to that. And I think the jobs that are in Canada, there's a wide range of things that will lead to. But I also think more important now, and especially, and I think, sorry, John, I'm probably going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think, don't just look at where the jobs are in your country or where the jobs are in Canada, so to speak. What's the global job market look like? And we're seeing more and more where in the gig economy, you can do work that's based anywhere in the world if you have that skill set. And I think, when you're looking at a university or you're looking at a college, really ask those questions. How are you going to help me prepare for the job market? What supports do you have? Do you have a co-op program? Do you have an employment center that's going to help me find jobs? Those are really important questions to ask when you're looking at an institution to study at.
I think that's great advice, really, for any student coming to North America. While you may work for a little bit in the US or Canada after graduation, the truth is most students will eventually return home to work. And it's nearly impossible to forecast what immigration policy looks like 3, 5, 7 years down the line. So I think keeping an eye on the global job market is great advice. I say this as a former philosophy major, which,
Nice.
oh, by junior year, I was desperate to have a conversation about something concrete. So my last semester in school, I lined up all these econ classes, and the numbers were so satisfying. But I hear you, and another benefit too, if you're pursuing a program or a general domain that you like, it's also the power of building a network, and I think that's a big part of the appeal of coming to study in a country like Canada as well. Not only meeting folks that are from Canada, but also students from around the world. The benefits of those network ties are really hard to overstate. So Mike, I appreciate your thoughts on that topic. Now, here's a broader topic for those eyeing Canada. Canada, you look on a map, it is a massive plot of land, but most students will go towards the major metropolitan areas. I know you're in Vancouver. A lot of students go to Toronto. Can you give us a quick geographic overview of Canada? And perhaps some of the differences between the major metro markets for those considering headed to the Great North.
Yeah, well, that's also a topic that we could speak for an hour. And when I look at the universities and colleges that Illume represents, it's about 30 across Canada, from small colleges in rural areas to major universities in the metropolitan areas. And I think this is another really important thing that families should be looking at when they're going to make their decision. When you look at the big universities, University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, McGill, these large universities, often, in a first-year class, a student's going to be sitting with 300, 400 students in a first-year class and very little access directly to their professor, and that can seem quite overwhelming. We have universities that we work with all across Canada that have a much smaller footprint, but also high quality institutions, but you're in a class with 30 people, you have access to your professor. So really, finding what you're fit, if you're from a small town, in a country and you haven't traveled abroad, plunking into downtown Vancouver in a class of 300 people can be very, very intimidating for you. One thing that I really encourage people to look at in Canada, and people aren't familiar often with it, is the college system that we have here. In Canada, we have an amazing college system that is also funded by the provincial governments of Canada, highly regulated, excellent quality of education, but it tends to be much more affordable and much more accessible, and also has a fantastic transfer system to the universities in that province or even across the country. So I think some students think, I'm a university student, I want to go to a university, but they might benefit by doing their first 2 years in a college and then transferring in the third year into a university and take that approach. So, really, it's one of these things where in your research phase, it's what are your motivators? What are the levers that are really important to you? Is it just ranking? Okay, that's clear. Is it affordability? Is it accessibility of those things? Because, I live in Vancouver. The cost of living in Vancouver compared to a province like New Brunswick or Manitoba or even Alberta, it's much higher. So there's a lot of things. And I think this is why, it's so important to speak to professionals and to really ask a million questions before you study, because, we make the joke in Canada, MTV, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and to a lot of the world, that's all that exists. But, I look in British Columbia, we have, we work with North Island College on Vancouver Island. We work with College of New Caledonia and University of Northern British Columbia and Prince George, University of New Brunswick and New Brunswick, and everywhere, Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology in Manitoba. These are all excellent institutions. SAIT, Bow Valley College in Alberta, these are all excellent institutions that have very strong offerings. So it's all about doing your research. This is one of the biggest decisions you'll make in your life, is where you will study abroad. Financially, the implications on your life, everything, and really doing that research and finding out what's the right fit, and talking to people that can really help you make that decision. And, if that person that you're talking to, whether it's an agency, whether it's the school, if after the 10th question, they start getting frustrated with your questions, you need to go find someone else to talk to, because you should be able to ask 500 questions about this. Because as I said, it is the biggest decision that you're going to make in your life. And if the person that you're talking to that's supposed to be guiding you is frustrated with the questions about jobs, about living, about affordability, about the housing market, those are all things you have every right as a student. And I would really encourage you to not give up on those questions. Go find someone else to help you if they're not answering those questions properly. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be sure to find someone that can guide you and ask those questions. I might have ducked the question a little bit, John, but I think it went in an interesting way to what students should be looking at across the country.
No, my takeaway is that's a great litmus test for a university, is the time and patience afforded to you by folks at that school. Completely agree. They should be giving you 100% of their time and answering 100% of your questions. Mike, I want to close just a couple minutes with a little lightning round. We can't afford the special effects, so I'll go there. Yeah. I want to ask you, overrated, underrated. Couple of things about Canada that are top of mind about Canadian culture. Overrated, underrated. Just want your hot take. Number one, poutine. Overrated or underrated?
Overrated. Not a fan of poutine.
Agreed, especially on a warm day. Oof. All right. Number two, maple syrup.
Oh, that's a hard one. So good on waffles. So good on waffles. So I would say underrated. You have to put it on waffles or pancakes. Yeah.
Okay. My 5-year-old will eat nothing unless there's maple syrup. So I agree. Number three, Banff National Park. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've traveled to 75 countries. Banff is perhaps in my top 5 of places in the world. Everyone in their life must visit Banff once.
Yes. For those of you Googling, look at the Google image search. It looks like the land before time. The sport of hockey, overrated or underrated?
Oh, see now we're getting in. This is almost getting into religious terms. It's underrated. I played hockey in university. Vancouver Canucks are my team. I'm a diehard supporter. So for me, if you come to Canada, you got to get to an NHL game and experience that once in your life as well.
Oh, it's a beautiful, strange sport. And I know most international students come from countries where, as Americans call it soccer, the rest of the world calls it football, is the big deal. What was awful as an American is Canada all of a sudden has an amazing soccer team that rules CONCACAF, which has been
painful. We're getting there.
Yes. All right. Last question. Overrated, underrated. Tim Hortons.
Way overrated. I do not like Tim Hortons at all. The coffee makes me feel like I'm going to have a heart attack when I drink it. And we call the Timbits, the little famous donut holes there, we call them fat pills. So they're just pure sugar.
All right. That's fair enough. I like Tim Hortons. They have them in the northern states, Michigan. I find the coffee to be fine, but there it is.
I went to the Tim Hortons in Dubai, and that's interesting. The Tim Hortons are popping up. They have them in India. They have them in different places now. So Tim Hortons is going global.
What a fascinating example of globalization and how it's changing every year. But one thing that will not change is the power of a degree from a Canadian university, despite all the changes. So Mike Henniger, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks so much, John. It was fun. Thanks for having me.